Hello, everyone. This is Kathy Shimpock and Linda Bennett. I am the crone.
And I am the queen. And here we are to share a little bit of tidbits with you regarding
Your practice.
Yeah. And how you can strengthen your confidence as a practitioner.
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're going to talk more about hypnosis, but I think there would be ways of using these same tips to help you if you use guided imagery with life coaching or some other skill.
Absolutely. It's any time you're working, whether it's one-on-one with a client or even with a group of people, it's how you can find additional ways to communicate. And our language and how we communicate with our clients can make or break a session.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, first question we have is, what technique should you use when? You have a lot of different skills and a lot of knowledge after you complete any program that you may have, but when do you use all of those techniques? How do you know how to do that?
For me, I think the most important thing is when I'm working with a brand new client, the very first technique I'm going to be using with a client is a deep, deep relaxation. More so than a therapeutic objective. The objective is really for the client to experience hypnosis in such a way that they're now going to be eager for more. They're going to trust the process enough to allow it to happen. So while I may weave in a tiny bit of therapeutic objective, the real key to it is that they have a physical experience of relaxation. Isn't that what you would say?
Well, I think that's very important. I try to have a long enough session so that I'm sure that they really experience that relaxation.
Okay. So how long would you say would you want somebody in trance?
Probably somewhere 30 minutes to 40 minutes, yeah. I would say.
I would say that too. And I think sometimes the very first time you work with a client, you have a tendency to take too long with the intake. I think with a brand new client, we have a tendency sometimes to ask a gazillion questions, trying to get down to what the bottom line is. And actually the client may not be ready to reveal what the bottom line is. And we need to build that trust in the process of hypnosis first. So I may not do more than a half-hour max interview with a brand new client, and that includes educating them about what hypnosis is. I want them to experience hypnosis, and then the next sessions, then we can start to peel away more of the layers of the onion, and they're going to be more open to that therapeutic process.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I often hear students say to me that they spend most of the intake trying to figure out what the root cause is. And I'll be honest, I don't care that much what the root cause is, and I rarely spend time trying to dig it up through asking life coaching questions, because often the client doesn't know or doesn't trust me to tell me, and it really doesn't matter. The subconscious mind knows what the root cause is. And if the session is done in a way that you activate the subconscious mind, that's all you have to do.
Exactly. And, if we're always putting forth that we're asking the subconscious to clear and release all causes and reasons for the problem, whatever the problem the client's there for, it's amazing what can be released. And the client may not even need to know what the bottom line is. Now, I do believe that as you do more sessions with a client, if they are in need of knowing what the core issue is, it will then surface. But it won't probably surface the very first time.
Yes, I think that's true too, that sometimes my clients will say they've had a dream. They keep having a dream after this session, or there's some continuing imagery that's coming up for them, or bits of memory. And in that situation, usually enough of it will come forward at that point that if they need to understand that, they'll know it.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. So one of the questions we received was, how do you know what metaphor to use? That's a little bit of a throw of the dice for me. I don't know what the right metaphor is to use until I'm sitting there with my client. I had a situation just the other day where a client was struggling with a situation in their life, and I was trying to figure out what metaphor I could use for the client. So I had to throw out, well, is it like this, or is it like this, or is it like this? I threw out about 4 or 5 different ideas, and all of a sudden the client goes, yes, that's what it's like. Then I knew where to go. So I just kind of throw things out and see what they grab onto. And I find that, then I have to be able to create a metaphor right on the spot. Now, if I already have a pretty strong metaphorical library built, then I can go into my metaphorical library brain and pull that out and then just fly with it. I don't have to go looking for the script.
I agree with that. I use storytelling techniques since I'm a storyteller, and often what I find is that if I really listen to my client, that sometimes they will say the metaphor. And I start writing down phrases, or it's like this, ways they describe it in metaphorical terms. And then I do the exact same thing Linda does. Is it like that, or is it more like this? Do you feel like you need to unplug from this? Do you need to knock it over? Do you need to bury it? What is, what's the metaphor there? Right. And then they'll come up with which one it is. But from there, I think what's really helpful to me is that because I'm a storyteller, I'm used to creating stories. And I would say if you like that approach, even reading fairy tales or old folk tales, go on the internet and look for those old stories, and then you'll find a way to create a story on the fly with your client being the hero or heroine of the story.
Absolutely. I think also that there's lots of great resources out there to understand symbols and metaphors. And sometimes the simplest tool can be looking at a tarot deck to see the symbology there, or even looking at a dream book of symbols and seeing what's common for a symbol, what a particular symbol might mean, and out of that you can start developing this awareness in your library. For those of you who have taken hypnotherapy training with me, you've been introduced to the metaphor cards, and I find that sometimes even taking those cards and placing those images out in front of my client and letting them pick an image that they relate to can help understand more where they're headed to. So that's another resource you can use.
The Carol Pearson book, Awakening the Heroes Within, some students may have taken that class in developmental psychology, and what is so wonderful about her approach is that she works with 12 very familiar and common archetypes. And you see those archetypes within all the imagery that we're used to, certainly within the stories, but also within the tarot cards, within a lot of other symbolic representations. And sometimes a client will come in, and if you're familiar with this kind of concept of the archetypes, you can identify what archetype they're in, whether they are the caregiver, whether they're behaving as the warrior, whether they're behaving as a child. And from that understanding, you can take that knowledge to also help you to create a metaphor.
Fabulous. And when you look at these different images like the child or the warrior, please keep in mind that there aren't any that are better than others. They all have an important role to play, and they're all part of all of our lives. If you haven't seen Where is Joe, I highly recommend you find that movie and check it out, because it's a great example of the hero's journey that we're all on. And when we work with our clients, I think very often we are there to help them find their own hero within and to help them navigate the journey that they're on so that they truly can become the hero of their own lives.
I often tell students I think there's really two things that's important in life coaching, in spiritual coaching, in hypnosis. And the first one is that as the coach or the therapist or the hypnotherapist, we are there to listen to our clients. And it's really important that the client feels completely heard. And that's a real listening skill that we have to develop, because it's so easy to have the client talk and start thinking about, well, what script am I going to use, and what's this and what's that. But if you can be 100% present to an individual, then they actually feel heard at this profound level that allows them to move on beyond their story. And the next thing I think is really important is to provide unconditional regard for your client. So some people say unconditional love. That may be a bit strong at times to say, but unconditional regard, where we give each individual acceptance for who they are. And many people never feel that they've been heard in their life. They never feel that they've been given unconditional regard. And so this can be a very healing moment for them.
Absolutely. When we started our conversation this evening, we were talking about what techniques to use and when. We talked about what to do with a brand new client. Now it comes down to, when do I use parts therapy? When do I do past life regression? When do I, which technique am I going to use? And once again, that comes back to what Kathy was just talking about, listening. You've got to listen to the client, and based on what they're saying, then you take action. And I don't plan ahead of time. When my client's coming in, I have no idea what I'm going to do that day with them. I don't know where it's about to go. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love the work so much, because it's such an adventure. It's because here I am, okay, I don't know what's going to happen, so here we go. And I think the key to it is, if you really familiarize yourself with each one of these techniques, practice parts therapy with one another. Call a friend that's a hypnotherapy graduate or a life coaching graduate. Do some sessions with one another. Practice each one of these techniques so that anytime you can do them and you don't have to think that hard about it. And I think that's where a big part of it is, coming from a place of practice and really knowing the techniques.
So I'm going to ask you a question, Linda, because sometimes I have hypnosis students indicate to me that they have never had a hypnosis session, that they only do self-hypnosis. So what is your take on that one?
I think that's unfortunate.
I do too.
I really believe that you really don't understand the work until you've experienced the work fully with somebody facilitating it for you. I know for me, that's how I first came to hypnosis, is because I was the client first, and I was so amazed after 2 weeks that I became a student. And when I was a student, I was in a small class, fortunately, but we practiced every other week, at the very least, sometimes every week, doing sessions on each other, and then talking about it afterwards and what we experienced and why we thought we did this. And I don't think you can get enough of that. And to not allow somebody to facilitate a process with you, I think is really a disservice to yourself. And I know sometimes people are reluctant to allow somebody else to see their stuff. And I'm going to say that if you don't trust the process of hypnosis enough to allow somebody to facilitate for you, why should anybody trust you to do the work for them? So I think if you haven't been getting sessions, you need to find somebody to connect with, get a couple sessions. Even if you said once a month, I'm going to have a hypnotherapy session, just to see what's up, what's new for me, I think is really so important.
I agree with that one. often I find myself like other practitioners. We get busy with things that we're doing and things start coming up for ourselves, and I'll start to feel stressed or overwhelmed. And then all of a sudden I have this little idea in my head that says, you need some hypnosis.
Or life coaching, whatever
Yes.
it may be.
Yes.
And, we're not, we're all in the process of becoming more enlightened each and every day, and to use these tools on ourselves. I think, yes, you can do a great job doing self-hypnosis and meditation. I think that's lovely. And I also think that we have a tendency to get in our own way, even to the point of denying that we're getting in our own way. And it would be of service to us to allow someone else to help facilitate and give us another perspective.
Right, right. I've had another question before from students, and this is the question about having a client who comes in who appears that they may have an attachment. And the question is whether or not you use spirit releasement techniques or whether you use other techniques, traditional hypnosis or parts therapy or other things.
Well, it's a really good question, Kathy, and I hear it a lot. I think, first of all, you have to be very cautious and meet the client where they're at. I think parts therapy is always a safer place to start than to jump right into spirit releasement, because it could just be parts therapy, and I think we can really, cause some problems for our clients if we don't approach it in the right way. And I never tell my clients that they have an attachment. They tell me. It's never, even though I may sense it and I may get a feel for it, I am not about to say to my client, you have an attachment. I'm going to ask the client to tell me more about what they're experiencing. How does that feel? Get them to describe it to me, listening for those cues when they say, well, I didn't really feel like myself. Oh, tell me about that, and then go into a parts therapy. And from there, it might morph into spirit releasement, but it may just stay as parts therapy, and it's an opportunity to integrate a part of ourselves that's been wounded or left behind or whatever the case may be.
So do you think that the subconscious mind itself can release an attachment if you used a spiritual script?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think
with the Archangel Michael or somebody
Sure.
else in that script without ever really engaging directly with the attachment?
Yeah, I think that's why I always ask the subconscious to clear and release all causes and reasons, including any outside influences and energies. I just kind of throw that in, underline, and the client doesn't know what I'm saying, and I'm not trying to deceive the client. I'm just suggesting that if the subconscious and the universe and the angels and everybody else that's hanging around here is ready to take care of this for the client, take care of it. We don't have to make a big deal about it and get them all pulled into some big drama.
Right.
So I think, languaging that we're clearing and releasing all causes and reasons then sets the stage that if there's an attachment, it could very easily go and nobody needs to know anything about it.
Right. I had one of my first past life sessions a student did on me. It was like a life between life session. And in that session, they asked where we were, and I was in this room, and they wanted me to turn the lights on, which I did. And there was a very large, dark, hulking kind of figure, sort of like the Lurch figure on the Addams Family, but I couldn't see the face. It was in the corner. Now, I was a student of hypnosis, and even in the trance state, there was a part of me that could pick up on the practitioner's voice thinking she has an attachment. Mm-hmm. I could hear this little happy voice like, oh, we got an attachment going, And they started asking these questions, and they said, well, who is this figure and whatever? And the first thing that came to me was, this is fear. This was my symbolic representation of what fear was like to me
Right.
between those two life
Sure.
times. And so they said, well, what do you want to do with this fear? And I said, well, we'll release the fear. And they said, well, how do you release the fear? And I said, the fear has to face me, or I have to tell it to go. I have to see its face, or it has to, just go on its own.
Sure.
And so that's how we released it.
Fabulous.
But after it was over, they had quite the discussion because they were sure it was an attachment. But I never felt it as an attachment.
Right. Doesn't
so
have to, yeah.
Right. So I think these images can come, and sometimes as a practitioner, our mind's going 5 zillion miles.
Right.
We're trying to look at every possible ramification of a client.
Right. I often would say that I do a fair amount of spirit releasement work. However, I will say that a lot of times what I could see somebody interpret as a spirit releasement is just, again, parts therapy. It's just a metaphor for a belief. It's something of that nature, and it's not really an attachment. So I think, again, you have to be very, very careful how you proceed and don't just jump the gun on those kinds of situations.
Right, right. So those are the things. Those are the actual spirit releasement ones. Are the sessions I refer to Linda because I don't do those directly, but I do parts therapy, and usually I can work with metaphor, with spiritual imagery. I don't think it's necessary for everyone to take every kind of case.
No, absolutely not.
So when I get those and somebody says, I believe I have an attachment, then I say, I think you need to see Linda Bennett because she has all the gifts in that area,
Well, it is. It is a fun area to be.
I know.
working
It's
in.
a fun area.
So these are some of the questions that we've gotten this past week from people wanting to have some answers on. And I think that, the key to it is we're happy to answer questions that you have. Keep sending questions to us, and we will do our best to come up with some reasonable answers for you. So is there anything else, tonight, Kathy?
I think there's just maybe 2 other things. One is that we have 3 upcoming workshops that are continuing education opportunities for all practitioners who need to have CEUs. And one of them is about working with your clients to understand what to do with the metaphors that they come forward with after their sessions, to help them with that, understanding that symbolism. The other one is a technique called soul collage, which is also a symbolic imagery technique that allows your clients to create a deck of cards, which is like a deck of oracle cards based on their own imagery and symbolism that can be used within sessions. And the last is Linda's upcoming PTSD.
Yeah, wellness and PTSD, yes. It's going to be a 4-week seminar and lots of tools, resources to help the population that's struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder. Interesting enough, a lot of people think that PTSD is working just with veterans. And that while there is no doubt about it, those who have served in the military do suffer, a number of them, from this condition. The number one cause for post-traumatic stress disorder is actually car accidents. So dealing with clients who are struggling with this condition is actually more common than one would think. And so I'm going to be sharing a lot of little tidbits of things you can do to help those clients move through this condition outside of the medical community as far as drugs and things of that nature. So I think it's going to be a really exciting workshop.
Do you think they're interested in how these workshops are going to be run on our website? Do you think that's a question that we should answer?
I don't know. Good question, Kathy.
Well, let me tell you how it's going to work. Each week there will be new material. So you have for the duration of the class. For 4 weeks, we'll have the material up for 5 weeks, so you'll be able to access it. Each week, new information will be posted. There will be videos or audio introductions from us. There will be narrated PowerPoints that will be like a video. So you will get all that information. In addition to that, there'll be homework or exercises that we will ask you to do that you will give us feedback on. We'll have an opportunity for a Skype call, or you can email us with questions, or we get the class together. We can ask questions and discuss the topics together. There will be other materials that we find that are helpful to you. They may be videos, they may be articles, they may be worksheets of various types. So you will get a lot of information, and at the conclusion of it, you'll get a certification with the continuing education credits and your completion of this area of study. And really what we're trying to do is to make these as practitioner-oriented as we can, so that any holistic practitioner could take one of these workshops and find it helpful.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great explanation. Thank you for doing that.
You're so welcome. Okay, well, I think that's all we have for this week. Please keep sending your questions to us. Let us know anything that we might be able to talk about that could be helpful to you in your practice. We want to be here to support you and have the Heart Symbol community be that place for you. Thank you for listening today.
And have a great week, everyone.
Namaste.